describe Harrow East as vibrant, diverse and safe area.
Yeah.
How safe is it in terms of crimes and antisocial behaviour?
Well, put it this way, the position on recorded crime, it's the lowest in the whole of London. It is the safest, and it has been for many months.
Why is this?
I think, well, there's two reasons. One is that the police locally take a very strong and stringent view. They won't tolerate crime. The borough commander now takes the view of saying, my job and the police's job is to catch the criminals, charge them if they've committed a crime. It's then up to the Crown Prosecution Service to take them to court and decide for the courts to decide if they're guilty or not. So because of that, there is a big impact, and the clear-up rate has improved quite dramatically over the last 2 years as well. I mean, it used to be that Harrow had a low level of crime, but actually apprehending the criminals was pretty low. Now that's improved quite dramatically, and I think that as a result, a lot of the criminals that are habitual criminals in the area are in prison, and the police are securing very good levels of arrest, very good levels of convictions. So the people that commit crime are in prison. Now, it's never nice to be the victim of a crime, and I'm afraid the Indian community in particular are more likely to be burgled or be the victims of crime.
You have a rich, affluent Asian community.
Yeah, but they are the most law-abiding community of all. So least likely actually to be criminals, but most likely to be the victims of crime, and therefore that has a big impact. Burglaries, residential burglary is always an issue. If you've been burgled ever, it is a life-changing thing that happens to you. I was burgled about 10 years ago, and I still remember it vividly. And for people who've had that terrible experience, it's awful. The good thing is that the residential burglary has plummeted because the police have apprehended the habitual burglars in the area, and they're in prison.
What are your views on parents calling the police now because they can't deal with their children?
Well, I have to say it's nonsense. I mean, but parents have got to control their children, and that's part of the duty of being a parent. And I do think it's important that parents take their responsibilities seriously and learn what it is. I mean, the great thing, once again, of the Indian culture is the extended family, where everyone either lives together or lives close together to each other, and therefore help and advice is on hand of how to cope with troublesome children, if you like, but also for sometimes
the extended family.
Yeah, sometimes it's for the children who having difficulty coping with their parents. Sometimes for them to go to their grandparents and just get some advice and help, or uncles and aunties. I think it helps. The whole culture is one of, we look after each other, we stand on our own 2 feet, we don't depend on welfare, we get out and work, and education's important, and if you're disruptive in school, you're not going to learn. So it's very important then that ethos is passed on to other types of people.
What about problems with the elderly in your constituency who have problems of living with the wider extended families? Is there more social housing, or is there homes for the elderly?
It's one of the serious gaps there is at the moment. People that came to this country originally, so the first generation, often, particularly women, didn't necessarily learn English, or they didn't learn English that well. Their partners often sadly have deceased, because women tend to live longer than men, and then if their families have moved on and moved elsewhere, or and they're not together with their families, then it becomes quite a challenge. I think that one of the challenges over the next 5 to 10 years is going to be providing sheltered housing, providing appropriate nursing care that caters for the cultural and language needs, and also the digestive needs of people from the Indian community originally. And at the moment, those sorts of services are not available, and I think that's something that needs to be done.
The Asian family is breaking down on the extended family.
Yeah, well, I think it's a case of
model now.
Well, I think it's a case of
not looking after the elderly.
I think back to my own family, where my own family used to live. Everyone used to live in around Harrow, Wembley, and Hillingdon, so the whole family lived within very near facility. But now they branched out. They moved to other areas. The same thing is true of Indian families. They've moved on and beyond, and of course younger people, younger families may find difficulty in buying a house locally, so they move somewhere else. So then looking after their parents is much more of a challenge.
But those who are put in these elderly homes, there tends to be a problem with the medical care of these elderly people.
Often it's the language, because you need nurses or care assistants who can converse and understand the needs. And I think part and parcel of it is the language. But it's also the cultural aspects as well, which I think is important in the process.
And now you have a low unemployment figure in your area.
Yeah.
How did you manage that?
Well, I think the interesting thing is, obviously, that because of the high standard of education, young people tend to go on to university, so they're professionally qualified. The mood of the electorate, I mean, we talked about the Indian community in Harrow. 35 to 40% of my constituency are Indian background. Their attitude is you go and get work. You know, you don't sit there and draw the dole or get benefits. You go and work, and I think that's true. We're down at 1.8% of the people unemployed between the ages of 16 and 64. So I think that's really positive news. That's virtually full employment, and I would like to obviously see everyone in employment. But the good news is I think that unemployment's plummeted. It was about 6% when I was elected. It's now down to, say, 1.8%, and the population has obviously grown. So, from that perspective, we've got great opportunities for people. So everyone that wants a job can get a job. And I've counselled. It's interesting because I've counselled some young people about going on and getting a job and furthering their career. And now we've got an interesting turnaround. The employers come into schools, to schools fairs, careers fairs, to try and recruit young people at an early age, so they can then train them as apprentices to take them on, which is a massive change. It used to be people had to chase jobs and so on. Now it's employers chasing potential employees.
With regards to India, how do you see Britain's role in the new Modi government?
Well, I've celebrated what Sri Narendra Modi has achieved both in Gujarat and in India. Supported that government. I've been a supporter and friend of overseas friends of BJP for a long time. I think the key is that they've regenerated the economy, given people the opportunity. They're opening up the Indian economy, which is vitally important. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, has been to India more times than any other country. Actually has to go to Brussels a few more often, but he doesn't particularly enjoy that. So we're building that great friendship, and I think the great beauty of the relationship between Britain and India is that friendship. I was there when we unveiled the statue of Mahatma Gandhi just recently. That cements the relationship. I've had the opportunity of meeting Arun Jaitley and other senior Indian politicians. I think the point is that we're building that friendship. We want Britain and India to form a special relationship. I would like to see that special relationship being the same as between Britain and the United States. And if we can build that, I think we have a powerhouse to actually help and assist India, but also Britain.
Today, the British Parliament has a number of Asian male and female MPs.
Yes,
for the first
indeed.
time in the last election. How important is it for Asians to become further involved in British politics?
Well, I think
why?
one of the lessons from Uganda and other parts of East Africa is that the Asians ran the economy but didn't get involved in politics, and so as a result missed out, I think, on being able to actually exercise a degree of influence. It's important that we attract people from right across the various different groups that make up the United Kingdom. But one of the things I would always say is I went to school. I was at school when the Ugandan Asians arrived, and people arrived and it was snowing. They spoke better English than we did. They were dressed in a bit strange clothing because they weren't used to British weather. They were a bit confused. I grew up as friends with them. So when you grow up as friends with people, then you can interrelate with various different communities. So it's not just about having people that so-called represent minority interests. It's actually having people that have mixed and grown up with those minority interests, that understand them and can represent them. So from one of the things I've done, for example, in Parliament, is we have a system of all-party parliamentary groups on everything you can think of, every religion, every country. I set up the all-party parliamentary group for British Hindus, so that Hindus will have a voice in Parliament. Lots of other religious groups have had a voice, but British Hindus haven't. We've changed that, and now we're making an impact. I act as a mouthpiece for that, and also on behalf of the Indian representatives in my area and the Indian government.
With regards to the budget that has just
Yes.
been done recently, what impact will it have on your constituents?
Well, obviously there's been a tax reduction which takes place for every single person working. That's good news, more money. And it's a conservative belief that we should allow people to have more money that they earn in their pockets to choose to spend as they wish. And I think that's something that British Asians actually believe fundamentally. So I think that's something that we share. It's been a budget for savers, so a revolution in saving and to encourage people to take out pensions and to develop the long-term future economically. It's a budget that protects the elderly, but also assists young people in getting on the housing ladder by furthering. And last year we started with Help to Buy, an arrangement to assist first-time buyers. Now we're setting up a savings program where if you save money, the government will top it up by a quarter to encourage young people to get the deposits that they need to get houses.
What are your views on the row over the USA presidential-style election debate on television, where the Prime Minister has refused to join in all three?
Well, no, what the Prime Minister has said is, look, let's have a debate before we start the campaign. And he's said quite rightly, well, let's have everyone that's involved as a leader so we can actually get the comparison. One of our problems now is that our elections are becoming ever more presidential in certain respects. But they aren't. There's 650 individual elections for an MP to represent the area. And I think that far too much focus is given over to party leaders. At the moment, of course, my party leader, the Prime Minister David Cameron, is very popular, yes. And the opposition leader is very unpopular. And so I think in that respect, the more he's on TV, the better.
Okay. With regards to the political expenses rows that have been carrying on, your predecessor, Tony McNulty, was forced to pay back, like many other MPs as well. And there were media reports about your expenses as well. How did you handle that? Well,
I mean, basically the position was it's a row over mileage claims that I've made, which were over, I have claimed the distance I've travelled. And the independent authority believe that you should claim the direct distance, irrespective of the fact whether you've travelled it or not. And as a result, they arbitrarily reduced my mileage claims for 2 years by a mile in each direction for each journey I made. I find that, ridiculous, given that it's the mileage I've actually travelled that I think counts. Everyone knows in northwest London that the fact is that congestion and traffic conditions dictate that you can't go the most direct route. You go the fastest route, which is what I do. But I repaid the money, and I've made a contribution to charity as well.
Okay. With regards to your own political career, how far do you hope to climb the political ladder? Well,
I think what you do is you hope to get re-elected as a member of Parliament. You then seek to await the call from the Prime Minister at the time. If the Prime Minister wants me to do a job, then I'll be delighted to do it. And I don't have a particular job in mind. It's just whatever comes. But there are things obviously connected with my background in commerce, industry, and such like, where I think there's an opportunity to do things. Equally, given the diversity of my constituency, making sure that is recognised in government, I think is very important to me.
Now, Harrow East constituency is one of the key marginals ahead of the 2015 general election, with political analysts citing it as a key battleground. So how fundamental is this seat, and how difficult is this battleground going to be for you this time?
Well, and obviously, people see it as a battleground, and I think that's true. I mean, it's possible that I can be re-elected and there still be a Labour government, unfortunately. The reality is that we're fighting it very hard. I've worked for many years, 4 years before being elected, 5 years, and I've helped 17,000 people as constituents with particular problems and issues. I've taken 2,000 people on tours of the Houses of Parliament. I'm always out on the streets going to community events, doing the work of an MP, which I've done 7 days a week since I've been elected. The key point is to make myself available, to assist people. It's a very busy working environment, and representing such a diverse community, which is a great job to do, and I thoroughly look forward to doing it for another 5 years.
But political pundits are saying we're going to have another hung parliament. So what are the chances of the Conservatives coming back to power?
Well, I think the fact is that when we came to power in 2010, we did so jointly with the Liberal Democrats in the national interest. We rescued Britain from the brink of bankruptcy. We've taken tough decisions. We've asked people to make sacrifices in their lives. We're now at the point whereby we're starting to see the fruits of that recovery coming through. What we don't want to do is go back and risk it all again with a Labour government that would tax more, spend more, borrow more, and land us back in the same mess as we were in before. And I think British people understand that. And so I think when they come to vote, they will say, look, the Conservatives have done a reasonable job. We want them to continue with the job. Let's give them the opportunity to continue with the job and then review their case after another period in government. So I suspect people will hesitate and then say, yes, actually we want the Conservatives to actually carry on the task.
Why should people vote for you? Your constituents this time? Well,
constituents should vote for me because I've done a very good job. I've brought in money for schools, for hospitals. I've helped, as I say, 17,000 people with individual concerns and difficulties. I stand up regularly in the House of Commons defending people and actually holding the government to account, bringing to the fore local issues which matter. And I work, as I've said, 7 days a week on behalf of Harrow East residents. I regard it as being an honour and a privilege to represent them. I am Harrow East's representative in Parliament. I'm not Westminster's representative in Harrow.
And what's your message to your Asian community who account for nearly 40% of your constituency? Well,
I'm very proud to be associated with my local community. I'm called Bob by Cara by the local community for good reason. You know, I've grown up with them. They are my friends. I thoroughly enjoy representing them. I understand their mentality. I count myself as a Crinju, a Christian with Jewish roots who's an honorary Hindu, and therefore I think I am ideally able to represent such a diverse community.
Well, many thanks for coming to our program today, Bob, and I do hope you win your seat on in May on the 7th when we have the general elections. And well, that's all the time we have for the show. Your MP, your vote. We hope you'll join us again soon for another edition. It's goodbye from Toulouse.